Jordan and I have been married for a little over a year, and she's the bright, vivacious, energetic one. I'm a little more serious, but she balances me out, which is really wonderful. I went to a small town barbershop and since I was 5 years old, and as I got into college I wanted to keep going there because I liked the idea of supporting a small business. As the proprietor passed away and the son was in poor health, a lady started working there, started cutting my hair. She was interested in hearing my story because she knew I went to Clemson and she had a son that was about to go there, and so she was pretty curious, quizzing me quite a bit, and that turned out to be Jordan's aunt.
Yep.
And so after trying her best to get us to meet each other, we were both reluctant. Didn't seem to be the ideal pursuit, I guess, but we finally met up, and we became friends at first, which ended up being for about 2 years. We were always keeping each other close on the radar, so we were pretty curious. Didn't go to the same school, we didn't cross paths much, but about 2 years after we met, I was back to that barbershop getting a haircut, and Jordan came walking in, supposedly unplanned.
It was! He will never believe it, but it's true.
Looking back, we weren't ready 2 years prior, and we were in a good place, and it went smoothly, and we got married 8 to 10 months later.
Almost a year, yeah. We were married for, what, 6.5, 7 months before it happened.
Mm-hmm. In September, Jordan and I were playing on a co-ed basketball team, and we had our first meet and greet practice. It was just with people from all around Greenville, really neat group of people. We had a couple of hours that Sunday to play, and we got back home and we showered and ate dinner, and all was normal, and Jordan actually went to call her grandmother. It's interesting because at around 8:30 p.m. that night, I was in the room. Jordan dialed the number, and as soon as her grandmother answered the phone, she basically collapsed on the bed and was in immense pain, holding her head, disoriented, confused. Fast forward about an hour, I've got her parents there. She's clearly in a shape I've never seen her in. It was not normal. She needed medical attention. So that led to our first trip to the emergency room. The theory was she has vertigo. That explains the dizziness, everything spinning to the left. She's disoriented, the back of her head hurts, that's vertigo. Just hydrate and go home and you should be able to rest.
I remember about the first 10 to 15 minutes of that ER visit, and then I start blacking out, and I have vague memories of 10 to 15 minutes throughout the next 2 or 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
Is about all I remember.
We got her back home, and I was following the advice we had been given, trying to get her to drink fluids, which she could not. Following those instructions, I was still not comfortable. I got the parents all reassembled. This is the next day, and we went right back to the ER. Got admitted quickly. That was a 5-hour process. They checked her for spinal meningitis.
Something I'm glad I do not remember.
And they administered a lot of anesthetics to calm her down. At that point, she was pretty unresponsive. She was not lucid and of a good state of mind. But about the 5-hour mark or so, they said she has a weak pain tolerance, or she's just not handling this well. She just needs to rest. Maybe you should consult a neurologist and see if they have any other opinions. Do that in the next 2 or 3 days. Again, her symptoms were worsening. She started convulsing and was physically distraught, was non-responsive, was comatose. So all the parents, again, were concerned. I was ready to move to something new, and we found an urgent care facility. They ushered her right in. They immediately say, why has she not had an MRI? An ambulance is on the way. They reversed all of the narcotics and things that were given to her, and she settled down. They got administered. They gave her an MRI. Another amazing thing there, for the first time in this whole experience, we encountered a caretaker that was extremely studious and attentive to detail. He wrote down every word that came out of my mouth, and then he researched it. I mean, almost set the keyboard on fire outside in the lobby. And the MRI crew was leaving for the evening, and he was able to convince them to stay. And so they stayed well after their shift to give Jordan an MRI. The whole time I'm thinking vertigo or extreme migraine and dehydration. I mean, we haven't fathomed anything really serious. So they wheeled her back in and said, you'll have the results in 5 hours or so. Not 5 hours later, but about maybe 20 minutes later, the entire staff burst in the door. They wheel her out, they're hooking up IVs. I didn't know what was happening. And they say, she's going for surgery immediately. You need to go to the ICU waiting room. And that's just prior to where the neurosurgeon who was awoken and given the emergency call, she had arrived, prepped Jordan for surgery. We got called back, and that's where we got the news. She's had a severe hemorrhage in her cerebellum, and we have to operate immediately. She very likely will not survive, but if she does, the odds of her walking and talking normally are very low, and you just need to be prepared for her to be a different person. Which was shocking, 7 months after we got married and we're young, and we've never experienced this even with extended family. It's one of the first times I think we've ever been hit with reality that hard, where we suddenly are so small and helpless and powerless, and no amount of fight or flight or any variable, any human variable, I mean, they're all meaningless at that point. I've just never felt that void of control, I would say.
I don't really remember much. I do remember that after I awoke, after everything, I told you that one of the things I remembered is you telling me over and over that you loved me. And that's the last memory I have.
The time came and the medical staff graciously said, hey, we're sorry, but we need to get you out of here. And you need to trust us. And the surgeon said, normally I would give you updates throughout surgery, but due to the gravity of this, we can't. So it's going to be up to 5 hours. A real blessing, speaking back to the family structure we've had, and a motivation going forward for the family we hope to have one day. Cousins, friends, aunts, uncles, grandparents, everybody just flocked there. My brother got emergency leave from the Navy and got a car from Pensacola and flew up. People were there to support, her parents, my parents, me, everybody else. It was just unexpected. And I think one of the cool things was having godly men in my life that were there. Jim Phillips being one, some of my cousins and others, and a lesson to me is they showed up to show love and support and strength, but they didn't try to fix the problem or teach. And to me that was so powerful, because I didn't have any emotion left, and I feel like that could have tipped the scales. It could have provoked me to frustration, when instead I felt supported and like they were looking up to me to make a mature decision. Another level of that is my brother called me. He basically said, Chris, I've never been in your position before. Please know I'm only saying this because I love you, but you have to decide right now if you're going to man up and actually have a faith and practice it, or if you're going to fold and give up because it didn't go your way. And if this doesn't go our way, you need to decide right now what your next step's going to be. And that was powerful, because obviously Jordan means a lot to me. About 5 hours later, where the parents and I are called into a room, and the surgeon, we walk into this little room, and the first thing she says is, well, she's doing great. And we all immediately let out huge sighs of relief, going back to when my brother kind of gave me that challenge. I think my initial reaction, I knew he was right, and it led me to something that he had been trying to teach me, which was how to pray, and what are the differences between praying for an outcome that you want versus praying for acceptance of God's desired outcome. And I think being young and not having trials like this, that was the first time I actually saw kind of what that meant. My desire, of course, is that she recovers fully and this doesn't faze her, but really all I have a right to ask is that you just give me the proper response, because it's really not for me to, I have no power. Following surgery, we went to see Jordan, and within not long at all, her energy came back. She was so hysterically funny and just pure spirited. She told me before she even remembers that she doesn't know what happened, but she doesn't want it to be. I don't want it to be a negative thing. I want it to be a positive memory. And really, another humbling thing for myself is just seeing her live that out. She has let it be positive. In the coming week, Jordan went on to show signs of movement with her left hand. I first noticed when she signed a medical information release form with her left hand. One therapist that we can't really explain, but when she was in the ICU, he came and got her out of bed and let her make one lap around the ICU. Her blood pressure stabilized, and she, fast forwarding to now, has virtually regained everything that she ever had. Considering the MRI crew staying late, the very attentive doctor taking this very personally and showing the interest, the urgent care facility being ready and getting her administered immediately. There are so many variables. I don't see how even a cynical person, which at times I am, you can't not connect those dots, and then there's just too much
fell into place for it not to be the Lord that did it.
Before Jordan had her injury, I asked her one time, I said, "Do you feel called to anything?" And she said, "Well, yeah, I've always wanted to help people in hospitals." And was that 2 weeks later?
Probably, yeah, it seems about right.
2 weeks later, she's out of surgery. She's cheering up all the medical staff. She's cheering on other stroke victims that are walking for the first time and are scared, and she's showing them, that she's with them, and it was like she immediately entered that calling. For me personally, I never really dated a lot growing up, and then when Jordan and I got serious, it was like my world changed, and it really just became this dream scenario, and she brought a lot of joy and energy. We're 7 months into marriage, and it's just so smooth sailing, and then all of a sudden it was just immediately upside down in a way I just didn't think was possible. And I know that these things, for one, they do happen in people's lives, and people go through hard things. I now try to be more aware of how I treat others, knowing that people go through really devastating experiences, and I can't imagine if I hadn't had a faith, primarily, the Holy Spirit, loving family, a support structure, a godly support structure. I can't imagine how people get through things. It really showed me how weak my faith was. There was no substance behind it. It was convenient because it didn't really contradict anything, but it didn't mean anything. I just remember crying that first day back in church, and it's just, there's so much more depth now. Music like "It Is Well With My Soul" and things like that, and it's I have a glimpse now of, I think, what many of those wise and learned and experienced people have gone through. And a challenge to myself going forward is just to always keep this experience fresh and vivid. God gave me a wake-up call, and He's given us an opportunity to help a lot of people, and He's given us motivation to raise a family a certain way, to help other people, and He's given us a lot of focus that I don't want to lose and take for granted as I grow older, and maybe balancing business and having kids and realizing that we could experience another hard time.
You don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, I'm 24. No one thought I would have a stroke. You just have to hope and pray, and that's all you could really do. A
lot of folks that have been through really tough physical trials will say that your charisma and your energy level and staying positive can really dramatically help your healing process. Mm-hmm. And I think that's such a hugely spiritually contingent thing. I think it would be very hard to have that without hope of, if this goes wrong, it's not a loss. Giving up the control that we didn't have to begin with, the theory of control, and then just embracing it, I think.